in prep.
Hello, it's Matthew Dipple with Airtight Engineering. Welcome back for Module 5 of our Getting Real About Home Energy workshop. It's a program for real estate agents here in Saskatchewan. So Module 5, we're going to be talking about energy retrofits. So it's a bit of a shorter module, but it's going to build on some of what we talked about in the energy efficiency section in Module 4. A bit of an overview. We're going to start just by defining the term deep retrofit, talk about what that means. We'll talk about some common retrofit measures. We've got a great slide with some retrofit costs from the city of Saskatoon. And then we'll finish up with the Saskatoon Home Energy Map and looking at that tool and how it can help us and our clients if we're real estate agents. So you may have heard these terms, shallow versus deep energy retrofit. So here's just a rough definition for you. These aren't kind of strictly defined terms, but it can be helpful to know what people mean by them. So a deep retrofit often aims to really reduce energy dramatically in a house. So usually it's 40 to 50% or more, whereas a shallow retrofit is somewhat less than that. So it could be just a 2% reduction in energy use or less or a bit more. So an example of a shallow retrofit would be replacing an LED, a light bulb with an LED. There we go. There's a shallow retrofit right there for you. A deep energy retrofit could be upgrading both the envelope, so adding some insulation maybe, and the mechanical system, and putting in a new furnace that's perhaps smaller than the old one. So that would be more of a deep energy retrofit. A definition from the City of Toronto, they say a deep energy retrofit is an extensive, holistic overhaul of a building's systems, utilizing best practices with the goal of significantly reducing energy consumption and greenhouse gas emissions. So that's a good working definition for us. Some of the areas that we can include in a deep energy retrofit, these should start to feel a little bit familiar from our conversation in Module 4 about energy efficiency measures. We can include windows, insulation, air tightness. So this is all the building envelope. And then also the HVAC system. So the heating, the ventilation, and the air conditioning systems. So this picture here is an example of an older building that was undergoing an envelope retrofit. And this building needed new siding, which makes it a good time to add insulation. So for taking off the siding and putting on new siding anyways, that's a great opportunity to add insulation. So we can see here in the picture that they have put in a new air barrier. So they've got this taped very nicely. They've detailed these sort of plywood boxes here. These are to move the doors and the windows out because they're going to be adding thickness to the wall. And they've got that all taped so it'll be nice and airtight. And then they're adding this mineral wool insulation. And they're probably going to put in new windows and doors too at this point. So this is a great example of a envelope retrofit where they're adding insulation, increasing the air tightness, and probably adding new windows and doors as well. Looking a little bit more at windows, if we're putting in new windows, it's a great opportunity to upgrade to some high efficiency versions, right? So that's our sort of, you'll see this idea coming back that when we're going to replace something that's at the end of its useful life or is near the end of its useful life anyways, that is an excellent time to just pay that incremental cost to level up to the next tier of energy performance. So for Windows, some considerations for high performance. We talked about them last module. We want windows that are triple pane. We want them to have low E coatings and to have argon fill between those panes of glass. That's all to the good in terms of energy efficiency. And we also want to look for frames that are nice and airtight. They're insulated, they're robust. That's going to make for very energy efficient windows. I'll also just note here, so this picture is a retrofit for a basement, a foundation. So we've got this wood box here that the window's sitting in. This is probably sitting in the concrete wall. And then there is a stud wall inside, and there's a gap that's filled with insulation. And this stud wall is likely filled with insulation as well. Note that the window, however, hasn't been replaced yet. it's currently sitting in the concrete wall. So that's actually going to cause a lot of thermal bridging right at the edge of this window. So when this homeowner goes to replace this window, it would be best for them to actually set the window a little bit further back so that it's sitting in the insulation layer, or to have sort of an insulated lining around the new window to just prevent that thermal bridge right at this edge of the concrete here. So the type of window we get is important, and also the installation detail is really important. Lots of times, if we don't install a window well, we can undo all of the money we paid on a really good quality window. So that's something to keep in mind. If we talk about insulation, adding insulation to our house, there are three main areas we can insulate: the roof, the walls, and the floor, right? Or the attic, the walls, and the floor. And a couple of considerations around insulation. The first one is that attic is usually the easiest and the cheapest place to add insulation. Typically, there's extra space in there anyway. It's not going to be seen. We don't have to, take off siding to do it. So it makes sense that it can be an easy place to add insulation. A couple of notes with that. One note is that on older houses, a challenge we can run into is not enough space right down at the eave. So the insulation can really tend to get squished close to the eave, and that's why sometimes we see ice damming on old houses. So that can be caused by not enough insulation kind of by that eave. So that's a bit of a challenge. And another one is airtightness. So if we've got an attic that's not very airtight, let's say there are pot lights and there's air leakage at every pot light. There's a chimney going up through the attic, and there's air leakage all around the chimney, at all of the junctions with interior walls, etc. We've got poor air tightness. Even if we add insulation, we aren't going to get the full benefit for that attic because we've got a lot of air leakage happening. So in those cases, it can be really important not only to add insulation, but also to do some additional air sealing in that attic. And one of the things that we'll sometimes see is we'll see issues with moisture, right? So you add insulation, but you haven't air sealed that attic, and now you'll experience what's called attic rain sometimes. So you'll have moist air that goes up into the attic, condenses on the underside of the roof deck because it's really cold now, and then in the spring, that frozen condensation rains down onto the attic and ends up causing some staining on the ceiling. Looking at walls, we mentioned a couple slides ago that really a great time to insulate walls is if we want to replace siding anyways, or if our siding is getting close to the end of its life. That can be a great opportunity. It's not that we can't do it at other times, but it's just obviously an opportune time. In general, insulating on the exterior of existing walls is a much easier and more airtight strategy than insulating the interior. It's not that the interior is impossible, but typically that's only done if we have some sort of heritage value to the outside of our walls. So let's say we have a beautiful brick house, it's 100 years old, we don't want to cover that brick, then we'd look at insulating on the inside. In terms of floors, these can get difficult and complicated, especially if we don't have much head height in our basement. So let's say we've got low ceilings in the basement to begin with. We really don't want to add a lot of insulation to the floor necessarily. But something good to remember is that first of all, the air tightness of our basement is important again. So if we can put down some sort of airtight layer, poly sheeting or something that's taped nicely, that's going to make that basement airtight on the floor, that's a good thing. And we can also remember that the first few inches of insulation is going to make the most difference. So even if we've got a bit of a lower ceiling height, if we can even add 1 inch of insulation to that basement floor, that's going to make a huge difference, not only to the energy use, but also to the thermal comfort of that basement. So you'll be able to go down there in your socks without running right back upstairs because your feet are freezing cold. So let's talk a little bit more about air tightness. This is very important, and sometimes this can be one of the easiest things that we can do in a retrofit is just improve air tightness. And we've got some cases where air tightness is easy and some cases where it's difficult. So the picture that we're showing right here on the left, this would be a difficult spot to air seal. So we could see that there's an air leak happening right here in the thermal image, right at the junction between the ceiling and the wall. However, this house now has drywall in that's all painted and it's covering the airtight layer, right? So probably the airtight layer in this house is the plastic right behind the drywall. So how do we actually seal this? Well, we would have to cut out drywall and then tape plastic behind it and then reinstall drywall. So this is going to be difficult to fix this air leak. Other times we have easy air leaks. So a big spot where we see a lot of air leakage is doors. Doors are notorious for poorly not air sealing well. And so here's a picture of a door that's got a lot of leakage around the weather stripping. So we could improve the weather stripping, maybe improve the way that this door is closing, and making sure that it's a little bit more airtight. That's much easier, right? Weather stripping is easily accessible. We don't have to knock out drywall to do this type of fix. A couple things with airtightness is a big area where, in addition to energy savings, we're going to experience increased comfort because we're making the house less drafty. So that's important. Also, we're going to help prevent potential moisture issues by making a house more airtight when we seal up cracks where moisture might have gotten into the envelope. So that can be good too. And maybe one final consideration is when we do make a house more airtight, we have to make sure that we're still providing adequate ventilation for both fresh air for the occupants and also to dilute any moisture that the occupants are generating in the house. So often, if we're doing something just like putting some new weather stripping around the door, not a big deal. Likely we don't have to add ventilation. But if we're, say, doing more of a deep air sealing job and we are sealing up any gaps around penetrations in the attic, we're adding air sealing to the basement, we're replacing windows with more airtight versions, and we're doing a lot of work to the envelope, we'll want to make sure that we add ventilation. So an HRV or an ERV, that heat or energy recovery ventilator, so that we are able to provide good ventilation air to the occupants still. Moving on from the envelope, we can also do a lot with our HVAC system. So in terms of heating, if we've got older gas appliances, for sure upgrading to new high efficiency appliances is going to make a big difference, because even if your gas appliance was rated at 80% efficiency when you installed it, if it's 25 years old, chances are it's operating at a much lower efficiency than that. So maybe it's 65% efficient at this point. Who knows? So replacing with a high efficiency, 95% or above, that's going to be a huge energy savings. Also, we've got the opportunity to install a heat pump. So if your house isn't particularly efficient at this point, often we advise that you have a furnace, some sort of gas appliance as well. But you could look at installing a heat pump to provide your shoulder season heating and to provide your cooling. If you are replacing an air conditioner anyways, or if you're wanting to add air conditioning, making it a heat pump is a great opportunity to future-proof your house a little bit more and to give you some more flexibility with how you heat, especially in those shoulder seasons. Ventilation, we talked about the importance of an HRV, a heat recovery ventilator, or an energy recovery ventilator, and how those are really key components of a high performance home, not only in terms of energy efficiency, but also in terms of improved air quality. So those are some of the main areas in our mechanical system that we can really improve our energy use during a deep retrofit. And the other one that's not shown in the picture, but not listed in a bullet point on the slide, would be water heater. So we talked about how after space heating, water heating is our biggest home energy use. And so if we can replace our water heater with either a high efficiency natural gas version or move to an electric heat pump version, those are both good options for improving our home efficiency in that area. One nice thing about an integrated heat pump water heater is if you don't have air conditioning, that heat pump water heater is going to provide you with a little bit of cooling in the summer that you could distribute around your house if you wanted to. Okay, this slide, a lot of numbers, probably pretty small depending on how big your screen is. So we won't talk through it in great detail, but this slide is available in your slide deck as a reference. And these are numbers from the City of Saskatoon Home Energy Loan Program over the last couple of years. And so this is a great resource because these are very recent costs from within Saskatchewan that show sort of real kind of average costs of homeowners and some of the upgrade work that they've done in their houses. So I'll just highlight a couple here that I think are interesting. So note attic insulation, fairly inexpensive, couple grand, depending on the square foot cost of the attic. I'll note this is probably just adding insulation. This probably isn't removal of existing insulation and improved air tightness, which you may want to consider depending on how airtight your attic is. So that's something to consider. I also want to highlight installation of central AC coming in at just over $5,000 versus, let's look at a heat pump. Because remember, heat pump is just an air conditioner that can run both directions. So heat pump air source is coming in at $9,000, close to $10,000. So that's substantially more. But in the notes here, we see these were more expensive in 2022. In 2023, the cost has come down substantially. So far to date in 2023, when this table was made, the average was $6,600. So that's starting to look a lot more reasonable, right? You could pay a $1,200 premium to move from an air conditioner to a heat pump. And that's going to give you some sort of future proofing in your house to be able to run that in heating mode in the shoulder season as well, if you want. A couple other things. What were the other things I wanted to note? Oh yeah, water heater replacement. I'm not exactly sure why this one, where this one is at, but I will note an electric heat pump water heater. Yes, it's more expensive than just your sort of average run-of-the-mill tank water heater, but it's probably on par with if you get a fancy condensing tankless natural gas water heater. It's probably a similar cost range to an electric heat pump water heater. And then finally, I also wanted to note drain water heat recovery system. We talked about those in module 4. That's the 2 copper pipes, the copper drain pipe with the pipe wrapped around it. It's pretty cheap and it can actually save a fair amount of energy on your water heating bill. So maybe you want to improve your energy use for hot water. You don't want to install a new hot water heater just yet. You could always install drain water heat recovery as a good first step. So these numbers should be taken not as this will be the cost of this retrofit, but this is a really good order of magnitude piece for you to sort of have in your back pocket when you're working with your homeowners, to just have an understanding of, hey, order of magnitude, what do these different types of energy retrofit projects cost? So really grateful for the City of Saskatoon for sharing this data as part of this course. The last thing that we want to talk about in this module is the new tool that the City of Saskatoon has put out, which is their home energy map. So this is a cool tool that's using some sort of big data algorithms. It's based on the property assessment, the tax roll data for properties, and it creates a digital energy score for homes. What it does is it uses algorithms to equate, to sort of model and equate energy efficiency with property tax roll data, and then it tests and trains that model using existing EnerGuide results within the city. So it's not perfect. It is a first pass. It's a preliminary look, and it's not going to catch finer details, right? So if you have a house that is okay construction from 1920, it's not going to necessarily know that you've done a bunch of energy upgrades to that house. It's just going to see whatever's there in the sort of property data that the city has access to. So this platform does have the ability for homeowners to update their energy scores. Once you've done some upgrades to your house, you can go in, you can claim your house, and then you can add some upgrades to it. So it's not the same level of accuracy or detail as getting an EnerGuide assessment for sure. There's no one that's gone to each house and looked at them. This is based on satellite imagery, property tax roll data, et cetera. But this is a really great first pass to be able to rank houses against others. And I think a great tool as a real estate agent to be able to help understand the energy efficiency of different homes for potential buyers and sellers. So we're going to just watch, to end off this module, a brief video that just gives us a really nice demo of this tool. This is free. This is on the internet for your access. So let's just watch this video and see how it works.
Welcome to this demo video of the Saskatoon Home Energy Map. This was developed for the City of Saskatoon by Open Technologies and was really developed for the homeowners of Saskatoon in order to help them to get a better understanding of the current energy footprint of their home and to compare that to their neighbors and their friends, and also to learn about the retrofit measures, the energy saving measures that they can take to reduce their energy costs by about an average of 2/3, and also to boost the thermal comfort and livability of their home as they do that. So let's get started. The starting point is the map itself. And so what we see on screen are almost 70,000 dots, each of which corresponds to one of the homes in the city. The hotter, redder colors are those that have a higher level of energy consumption, so they're lower performers, whereas the cooler colors, the blues and the greens, are those that have a more energy efficient starting point, so higher performers. Before we drill into finding our individual home, I'll also point out some of the features that you can look at the data set by building type. If that's of interest, you can look at it according to the development patterns of the city, as it went from a fairly small footprint urban core, some of the legacy homes from there still being pretty energy efficient, to the expansion of the city, but also the improvement in building practices as that happened. So now we're going to find our individual home and claim it. I could go through the find an address function and just type in an address directly, but I'm going to go ahead and look in my neighborhood of Confederation Park and find my individual home just by clicking on a dot, which, wouldn't you know it, is not such a high performer. I'm going to pretend that it's my home. If it's your home, I apologize for putting you on screen. But 523 Carter Way. From its starting point, based on the modeled estimates, it's better than about 1/3 of the homes in Saskatoon, so it has some room for improvement. And because this is a relatively new neighborhood, it's particularly low performer relative to its peers. But the good news is that this is a home that, although it's 186 gigajoules, according to the modeled results so far, if it implements all the recommended actions, it could reduce that by about 58%. And its current energy consumption patterns are mostly allocated towards space heating and water heating, but then also base electrical and what have you as well. But let's say that I am the homeowner here, and after going through a verification check to prove that I am indeed a homeowner, and we use the roll number from people's property tax as something that would be reasonably accessible to them, and not terribly accessible to other people to validate that if they're going to add additional information about maybe some past upgrades that they made to their home that might warrant a new model run, or moving forward with a retrofit roadmap, that they are indeed the rightful owner of that home. So now we get our first cut of the more detailed energy model and energy score. So, one thing that we want to do initially is make sure that we're not missing anything, right? Like if we're just modeling their home based on their tax assessment data, there might be a lot of things that they have done to improve their energy through, improving the air tightness of their home, by implementing factory standard or high performance windows, adding insulation, solar PV, or a bunch of other things like that. For the purposes of showing you the scope of the retrofit roadmap, I'm not going to change a lot of these prior options. Well, maybe I'll just say that we have we've upgraded our very low carbon domestic hot water system. They don't have an air conditioner, but they're not terribly comfortable in summer, so they're thinking about adding it. And then when it comes to the primary heating system, it's nice to know, like, where assumption tends to default to natural gas boilers or natural gas furnaces, because that is the vast majority. But if it is something else, then it's useful to know that so that we can rerun it. Or if it is a furnace, it's nice to know how old that furnace is, either by just putting it in coarsely, or if they want to take the next step and get an exact estimate of age, and risk profile, then they can tell us the serial number and manufacturers, and we'll tell them that in more specific detail. So finally, before we rerun the model, there's a sense of, are they comfortable in their home today, or are they motivated to try and improve it? We've already established that they are thinking about increasing their air conditioner, so they're somewhat dissatisfied with their cooling in the summer. They might be satisfied with their furnace, but who knows, it might not last forever. And this is not a great energy performer, so they're probably spending more on energy bills than they'd like every year. So we take some of this past information, and now we're going to rerun the model, give them a new baseline score, and then use that to give them a specifically tailored retrofit roadmap for their home. So here we have it. We have information about how they stack up relative to their peers on energy use intensity, greenhouse gas emissions, identifying how they stack up on their climate impact, and a risk assessment for their furnace. So in this case, their furnace is getting pretty old, and it's probably something that they want to look at replacing within the next year or two. So that might be the sort of the time milestone to anchor their go forward on the rest of the retrofit roadmap. And so the retrofit roadmap is the specific measures that they can take, many of which are supported by federal or regional rebates, to get towards that 58% reduction. And we recommend them in order. There's a natural course of things, from improving the building envelope to then replacing your mechanical to then ultimately looking at renewables. And that's based on cost and cost benefit. And so because many people are starting from a fairly cursory understanding of what air leakage even is, and why reducing air leakage can improve, and what that means to reduce air leakage, that all information is right here, as well as the costs. And so for this measure, as you can see, it's a relatively low investment, but you get it back pretty quickly. So over the course of 10 years, you're going to get your investment back and then some. And then you're actually going to carry an annual operating savings. This is a slightly different picture for each of these. A lot of them are higher investment items. But in all of these cases, where there's a fairly attractive and fairly short-term payback scenario, we want people to see that, and we want people to start taking action. And what that action is for us, what that action in this tool, what that action is for them, is to connect them with the resources that can help them on the next stages of their journey. And so our central call to action is to connect with the Saskatoon Energy Coaching Service, and then have that hand-holding person that can help you with the complexity of taking not just this first step of knowing which way to go, but actually going down that path. And so that's the end of this part of the homeowner retrofit journey. That's the end of our tool, and that's the end of this demo. And I hope you've enjoyed it. Thank you very much.
Okay, so
Welcome to this demo video of the Saskatoon.
I want to watch it again. Perfect. So that was a little demo of the home energy map. I just want to highlight, I think it's a really great tool that the city of Saskatoon has put together here. And I really love the ability to, a couple things. First of all, the ability to see, as someone who might be purchasing a home, to see the energy efficiency of all these different homes in the city in sort of a core sense. To me, it really helps make visible something that's it's an important attribute of purchasing a new home, but one that we might not always understand just on the face of things. It's easy for us to look at a home and see if it's got a granite countertop or not, but understanding that energy performance is not quite as obvious to the average person. So I really like that aspect. And I also really love the focus on upgrades and retrofit path, and helping homeowners. You can go and you can claim your home, and it's going to give you some sort of next steps on how to make your home more energy efficient. So I think those are two great aspects to that tool. And with that, we come to the end of Module 5. Thanks so much, and we'll see you in Module 6.